Remember the video game adaptation curse? It started with the adaptation of Super Mario Bros. In live action and it continued ever since. With exception here and there, video game adaptation were most of the time ranging from pretty mid to complete garbage. But now we're seeing more and more success on that front. With the Sonic movies, Castlevania, Tekken Bloodline, and now Cyberpunk Edgerunner. And frankly, I think they figured it out. Well, at least I think I cracked the case on how the video game adaptation curse was broken. And it's frankly not that impressive, and I don't know how it wasn't figured out way earlier. First, let's figure out what are some good video game adaptations. Like I already said, the Sonic movies, Castlevania, Cyberpunk Edgerunner, Tekken Bloodline. We also have Street Fighter 2 the movie, the first Mortal Kombat movie, Street Fighter Assassin's Fist, and the King of Fighters CGI anime. Those are some that I would consider good adaptation. So how did those adaptations succeed? I mean, other than the obvious stuff like having a good story and good character, good pacing, let's put all that stuff aside, cause those kind of stuff aren't unique for video game adaptation. Your story obviously needs to be well made to work. So what is the similarity between all those adaptations? We will get into it, but first let me ask you, why do most people dislike the Uncharted movie and the new Mortal Kombat movie? It's real simple. Because those movies doesn't give you anything new and just take away from the main appeal of video game. The thing with adapting video game compared to other adaptation is that it's the only media where the adaptation take away from the original experience. If you adapt a book in a movie, you gain visual, acting, music. If you adapt a comic book, you get acting and motion. If you adapt those in video game, you also get to play as a character like Spider-Man, which is something pretty cool. But if you adapt a game into a movie, you always take away from the game. So the adaptation need to double down and really make sure to give the viewer something more, which is what the Uncharted movie failed to do. The Uncharted movie basically tells a story that is a mix of Uncharted 3 and 4 while pretending to be an origin movie. The thing here is that even if you enjoy the movie itself, the movie still only take away from the original experience. You can watch any Uncharted on YouTube and have a better movie watching experience than the Uncharted movie. One is the original and the other is just trying to adapt it in a format almost identical to the original but shorter. Uncharted is basically a playable movie because of how extensive the cutscenes are. And if you buy the game, you have a better movie than the Uncharted movie, but you also get to play the action scene, which is even better. One is the real deal with playable set pieces and the other is a cheap clone without interactivity. So it failed. It just take away from the player. And it's the same for the new Mortal Kombat film. It's a less interesting Mortal Kombat 9 that focus on someone you don't want to see and that take away the interactivity of the game. So what do you need to do to make it work? To put it broadly at first, you need to bring something new and quite substantial to the table while respecting the nature of the IP. And this is why those adaptations work in the first place. Those adaptations can be split into two categories. On one side we have Sonic, Castlevania, Tekken Bloodline, Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, and the King of Fighters anime. On the other side we can put Street Fighter, Assassin's Fist, and Cyberpunk Edgerunner. Those two camps are similar but have an important distinction. So let's take Castlevania as an example. Why does Castlevania work? It's really simple. To answer this question, we need to ask ourselves, what does it bring to the table? Well, it worked because the game that is adapted here is Castlevania 3. A game that didn't really have a story. It had a classic video game, go there and do that, but the character world and overall narrative was pretty non-existent. This applied to the Sonic movie too. The game was just basically beat Eggman with some little detail here and there. So anything that used this premise would have been a better story in itself. This also applied for Arcane. Arcane is based on the lore of League of Legends, but League never really had a complete story told. Just little snippets and little pieces being showed to the player. So telling the story here also makes sense. Really think about it, Tekken Bloodline, Street Fighter 2 and the King of Fighters anime all tell you the story that were just implying the game. So now watching those give you something more. You now have context, better character, better world, and a better immersion in the story of the game. Sure, you can't play it, but now you get to actually see the story that you didn't really see. They kinda work like cutscene of a story mode for those games, but that you can't have with the game itself. So making the story of a mostly storyless game is more often than not gonna work. You don't believe me? Okay, be honest, if the old Mortal Kombat film would have been released today, do you really think people would have loved it as much? Sure, it's fun, but the way the story adapts Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile and other elements of the lore and story would have pissed off the fan a lot. It's far from being a perfect movie, but at the time of this movie being made, Mortal Kombat barely had a story. Sure, now we have Mortal Kombat 9 telling the story of the first 3 games, but back then, it was something new. We got to really see the characterization of Liu Kang, Kitana, Sonya, and Johnny Cage. We got to see the tournament in an actual narrative. It was cool as hell, and it gave the game a new dimension. At the time, it gave something the game didn't. The new movie doesn't though, because now we have this story told. We don't need it as much anymore. And this is also what Street Fighter, Assassin's Fist, and Edgerunner does in a sense. But if you see that you can't tell the story of the game because it has already been told, do something else in the same world. Street Fighter 2, the movie, already told the story of Street Fighter 2. So what if instead of retelling the story, you tell the training of the 2 main characters and the origin story for the villain? This is something new. Cyberpunk 2077 tell a pretty good story from what I've heard, so it would be weird to tell it again. So tell your own story in that world. Video game world tend to have a lot of lore and great world building, so there's no reason to retell what was already told. If you want to do Cyberpunk, why not add a gangster loli and go Traeger style in this world? Now that's how you do it. It's not Cyberpunk 2077 again, but without the game. It's Cyberpunk Edgerunner, built with the anime storytelling format in mind. Now that we want to see. Keep in mind that if someone didn't play the game, they might enjoy more the adaptation than the fan who wants something new. Also, if you're wondering why respecting the source material is so important, well, it's because if you don't, you end up with something like this. That has nothing to do with the game, and beg the question, why adapt a game if you don't really want to adapt the game? It's not that retelling the story of the game is bad, especially if the story of the game is good, but if you really want to retell the story, make sure you try to add to it and not just take away from it. You already take away the game part. Which is why those movies tend to flop, because if the game already have a story, there is no way you can retell a 10-hour long story in a 2-hour long format. Sonic could, cause there was nothing here, so the story could have been whatever as long as it respect the game. There's the Nier Automata anime that's gonna come out, and it seemed to retell the story of the game, which will surely be good because the story of the game is good, but even Yoko Taro himself, who seemed to be working with the anime staff, said that the story will be changed because Nier was envisioned as a game, and retelling the same thing in a different medium wouldn't work as well. So even a story as good as Automata need to be changed. So yeah, I'm not alone to think you need to double down and bring something new to the table. I don't know how it's gonna pan out, but I will watch it for sure. In the end, if you want to do an adaptation of, let's say, Mass Effect, maybe instead of retelling the story of the game, you can tell the First Contact War with Henderson, where the Turian first attacked. If you want to tell Zelda's story, you actually can go for that. Zelda don't have much of a story, but adapting Link will be a bit tricky, but it might just work. Just know when to do the story of the game and when to do something else and you're good. As long as you have an actual story to tell and don't just want to ride the fame of the game while disrespecting the game you base your story on. If you really want to take away our control, it's your job to give us something interesting enough that will make us put down the controller and watch your story. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel, and don't forget to check out our other stuff. With that said, peace out.